Alright, it is What the Wednesday! What's up, Hacksters? Today I got to play a little bit because I worked all weekend. I was at Maker Faire and it was awesome! I hung out a little bit with Helen Lee, who was in the studio yesterday. You may have already seen the interview that we did with her about the Mini-Moo and assembling those, which was very exciting. So what I wanted to do for a hack night today that we're doing at Noisebridge with music was take the existing glove and turn it into something a little bit more supervillainous, because I'm feeling like this is cool. It's very sweet, but it's also designed for children, which is fantastic. It works very well. It's very friendly for that. However, I, as a grown-up, kind of want something a little bit more badass. So I played around with a technique that I first explored last week with our in-house Lulzbot Taz6 3D printer, which is this technique popularized by David Shorey of Shorey Designs, and that is 3D printing on fabric. So let's take a quick look at his Instagram and see what he's got in store. So he made some sweet spiky pauldrons for Stephanie. So cool! And people were also playing around with like this little pouch that they stuck an inflatable, this is programmable air, the inflatable tentacle controlled by Arduino, stuck into a little spiky pouch there. He's made little patches and stuff, all kinds of things. One really cool thing that he's done, besides printing on screen door fabric for wearables, which seems to work extremely well, and also metal mesh, you can also do that, but also he's used it recently for printing inside of a 3D printed part, not even as like a visible cool part of the project, but to reinforce it physically. So here you see one that has those 3 layers of screen door mesh, or however many layers it is, interwoven with the printer. So you basically pause the printer, lay down a layer of filament, pause the printer, put down the fabric, and then keep printing. And see how like the one part snaps on the left, and the one on the right that's been reinforced is just fine. So it helps make it much tougher. Very cool. Yeah, the technique here is that basically you, as I mentioned, lay down, let your printer lay down the first layer. In my case, I use, I'm really impatient, so I use 0.3 millimeter layers, and so I can sort of use that to calculate how thick to make the different parts of my model. And so I let it put down 1 or 2 layers. I'm not subjecting these to that much stress. If you're doing spikes like this, you probably want to put down more base layers, I don't know, as a support. And then you pause the printer. In the case of the Lulzbot Taz6, it moves the print head out of the way so that the extruder isn't in the way when you put down your fabric. Now what I do, I'm not sure if David does this or not, but I put double-sided sticky tape on the print bed. It is just this 3M Scotch tape, double-sided, permanent. But it also peels, it will hold at least twice. I've used the same tape twice while it was in place before switching it out for the next print. But also it peels up really easily while the print bed is still hot, so that's really nice. And that helps hold the fabric taut and in place. I experimented so one thing that accidentally happened with me is that while I was doing this for the first time, I accidentally had some of the fabric caught, because I have this big piece of fabric. I didn't want to cut it up, I wanted to use it all as one piece, and it got caught in there. Now what happens there, though, is that if you're familiar with sewing fabric at all, you might have tried gathering, and that basically creates this sort of effect where it's pulled up. And that's actually something that they used to do in like skirts and things. So I actually ended up doing it on the rest of the skirt as well on purpose to make this kind of, I think the word is ruched effect. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. But yeah, so then when I wrapped it around, it sort of had this sort of slightly draped and frilly effect, which was really cool. And the printer was able to tolerate the extra height in there with no problem, so that was pretty cool. And this is obviously feathers in the same filament color to match my robot owl Archimedes, so it was sort of a thematic thing. Now these feathers, I think, came out really nicely, and the way that I made the design is with one of my favorite apps. It's called Adobe Capture. So I drew these feathers as is with Sharpie, just freehand on paper, and then I used this Capture app from Adobe, which is free. Basically, you scan something with it. You can adjust the contrast so that it's very clear. Just pretend that this is like a drawing that's plain black on white, so it would be very high contrast. But yeah, you adjust it to where you want it, and then like you take your photo. This is a bad example because it's already got this really textured background, but oh well. And then you can like erase parts of it. You can crop it just down to the parts that you want, and you can do all kinds of other stuff, and then you can smooth it out. And this is going to be really complex because it's got so much detail. This was a really bad example. But then what you do is you can save it, and you look at the designs in your app, and you can convert them to SVG. You can export them that way, or as a PDF, or as a plain image. Let me see if I can tone that brightness down a little bit for you. Does that show up a little better? Here's the menu. So you can share it as is, you can export it as an SVG or whatever. Sorry, there we go. Or you can save it to your camera roll. And there's your options for exporting. There. And yeah, so I just saved these as SVGs and sent them to myself over email, and then opened them up in Tinkercad. Actually, I should have had that open. So Tinkercad allows you to import an SVG that just becomes a little model. And I'm going to have to sign in here. Just hold on for a second. So that creates a very simple 3D model from your SVG image. There we are. And it gives them silly names as well, which is really great. I imported all of these into a single Tinkercad model file thing. And then you have to be careful when you're exporting that you only have one thing selected at a time if you want to be able to reposition them with relation to each other. So, for example, this takes so long. My computer is being a little bit slow, so I hope it's not too, like, jerky for you. But, I'll see if there's any questions right now. Oh, here it's coming up. Cool. How does it work out here in Brazil with 2 megabytes? I'm not sure what you mean. The Capture app? Anyway, so here's my feather designs. The SVGs were imported into Tinkercad. That's a really nice image. Makes them all different colors. And then you can just grab that, hit export, and it'll create an STL. Remember to only select the selected shape, and that creates that file. You can also make an SVG for laser cutting, but obviously you've already had the SVG, so it doesn't matter. And then you bring that into your 3D printing slicer and send it to your printer. So that's how I did that. Again, we're using a Lulzbot TAS6 in the office, and the filament that I'm using is a PLA-PHA mix from Matter Hackers in this beautiful blue color. So I just sort of created different clusters of feathers that I thought would look nice together, and then did about 4 or 5 of those over different parts of the skirt so that it would look nice. Yeah. So having done that, I got excited about the potential of this technology to sort of jazz up my Mini-Moo gloves, because these are so sweet. Again, watch the video with Helen Lee from yesterday. She designed these in association with Imogen Heap and the Mimu Gloves team, which is these really amazing smart gloves that are like $2,000 or $3,000 though. And this is like $30 on Adafruit plus like $13 for a microbit, which is the brains of the kit, if you don't already have one. So what it does is, I should just show you actually. Oh. So it's like a gestural glove that you can do stuff with the accelerometer, with the buttons and whatnot, and the other sensors, which include like a temperature sensor, a light sensor, and that enables you to control stuff, not only on this little speaker, but also in Ableton Live or other MIDI software or whatever, or Pure Data, for example. So, yeah, I wanted to jazz it up a little bit, as it were, and so I've used cut up tights as arm warmers in the past. What I wanted to do was make carbon fiber armlet, I guess you would call it. And the problem with, so I use this carbon fiber fabric that I'm not going to pull out for you because I can only touch it with gloves on, and I do a manual layup. So I have a bunch of this fabric from Tap Plastics in San Francisco. You get it, and it's about like $50 a yard, but I have a bunch of it left over from an old guitar project. So I've been slowly using scraps over the years, and basically you just lay the fabric down over something. You can put down a layer of epoxy first, then your fabric, then another layer of epoxy on top of that. However, I am in a big rush because I'm trying to make it to a hack night tonight, so I decided to just put the fabric down and lay up 5-minute epoxy over it, which is this JB Weld, I think it's called Clear Weld, 5-minute quick set epoxy, and it's already pretty good. Yeah, so the way that I did that, I'll put up on the internet in a bit in a blog post, but basically I wrapped my arm in plastic wrap, put the carbon fiber over that, sort of taped the edges in place, which I was going to cut off, because the tape will kind of pull at the carbon fiber fabric weave and get it all distorted and stuff, and then placed the fabric down, and then mixed up all the epoxy really quick and like slathered it on and then like waited for an hour because it sort of sets in 5 minutes, but that just means that you have to stop trying to slather it onto something. It means that it's no longer active and it's just curing. So then it has to like sit for an hour to stop being really flexible and goopy. So I sort of hung out for a bit while that was happening, and it's not attached yet, but yeah, what I did first was 3D print these grommets onto it, because the fabric itself, even with the epoxy on it, is not that sturdy in the way that I'm doing it. I don't want it to be because it's wearable, but it does kind of hold its shape. However, also, if I tried to sew through this and attach it to something, then it would pull at the weave, pull it apart, or I wouldn't even be able to get the needle through in the first place. So I decided to print these grommets onto the carbon fiber fabric, which I haven't seen anyone do yet, so I'm pretty excited about it. And I'll show you how I modeled these grommets really quick. They're just like metal grommets, only they're plastic and they're printed right in place and they're already placed perfectly and you don't have to worry about it. I really love this technique. I just did it for the first time and I love it already. So I created a sketch in Onshape, which is my browser-based CAD modeling software of choice. I like Tinkercad, but it's more for like really simple stuff and also mashing up pre-existing models together. This is Onshape and it's great. Plus, like, you can access it from anywhere, so you don't have to worry about being on a computer that has it. Also, you don't have to worry about licenses unless you're doing something that you really have to keep private, because it's free as long as you have all your designs public. So here's the basic sketch that I did. It's just a side profile of the grommet. So it's 1.5 millimeters tall, that would be above the fabric. Again, I print at a 0.3 millimeter layer height, so I put a 0.3 millimeter base on it to go underneath, then the 1.5 millimeter triangle on top, and the way that this is done is so that it slants out, sloping down from the center, which has a 4 millimeter hole in the middle. You see that 2 mark there? That's because, right there, because if you double that, then you get a 4 millimeter hole. The whole thing is about 10 millimeters wide. And yeah, so it slopes down from there to the edge, which should be nice and easy and kind on the thread. Now, the inside looks kind of sharp there, and I added a fillet in order to smooth that out so that the thread doesn't get stressed either way. And that looks pretty nice. So after creating this model, what I did was, stop selecting. I created another sketch, which is basically a template showing the dimensions of where I wanted the grommets to go on my arm, on the flat fabric, so that it would sit nicely and wrap around my arm. And drew that as a sketch first, like so. And notice that there's no grommets in here right now. This is before I duplicated that first one and put it like all over. So first I created this other sketch that's like, okay, here's where they're all going to go in relation to each other. There's 4 in the middle because I want to put elastic through those, and that's what's going to hold the speaker in place. And then, so I created that sketch for the template, then placed all of these where they would go. And the cool thing about this is that if you export all of these, select all of them in the side menu here. There we go. And then export. Then you will end up with a single STL file with all of these in the same formation where they are here in the sketch. So that's really cool. It's really convenient. It makes your life way easier. And that means that now you can have, you don't have to arrange everything in your slicer. You can have it just like, bam, done. And then it's on Cura and it's fantastic and everyone's happy. So I did the same process with this. I took it into Cura, let it print the first layer, and put down some double-sided sticky tape around where they were printing. I actually do something that's probably a little sketchy, which is that I put down the double-sided tape, I sort of poke it in place while the thing is still moving, so that it's not sitting for a long time on pause, just so that there's no weird extruder issues. And then, paused it, put down the carbon fiber, made sure that it was patted down really well onto the tape, and then continued the print, which only took about 10 minutes total for that whole process, which is fantastic. Then I cut it out, put it on my arm, and laid it up with the carbon fiber, with the epoxy. So the way that looked, I've been putting up in my story. Here's a quick shot of how it's being printed on there. Isn't that gorgeous though? It's gorgeous. And then here's the epoxy layup, just sort of taped onto my arm. And I held that there for an hour, and then I pulled it off. And then I cut off all the tape, or pulled it off, and now I have this. So I cut off around everything there. The whole point of the grommets is that I don't have to, they're like right by the edges here, and so they sort of form the corners of the fabric, which is always kind of a weak point. And so now those are not weak points, they are very strong points, and I'll be able to, having left the insides of these free of epoxy, like this part in here is clear, there's no epoxy there. That means that it will be very easy to poke the needle through and sew stuff. Come on, focus. There we go. And also this is where the elastic is going to go through, so that'll be super simple. And as soon as I have these sewn in place, I have to get going because I'm already an hour late to the thing. Such is life. But I got excited making stuff and I wanted to share. So, yeah, you can 3D print on carbon fiber. It's so cool. I mean, look at it. It's so shiny. Oh, it's so gorgeous. Yeah. Oh, love it. So I may or may not actually get this done in time for tonight. I'll probably just bring the pieces and try to assemble it. Another thing I did, oh, very important. So I don't recommend that anyone do carbon fiber without taking a class on it first. There's lots of safety stuff. Use a mask, use goggles, use gloves. Don't get this stuff on your skin, it's very, very bad. Don't breathe it in, it's very, very bad. And I also sealed the edges with a clear caulk. So to make sure that none of the little fibers were going to come out and get lodged in my skin, because it's very, very bad. It's very, very bad for you. Carbon fiber is bad for you. Don't do it. Or take very good safety precautions. That's my lecture for today. That's all I gotta say. Let's see if there's any comments about this. Bum 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 bum. Oh, everyone has good comments. Well, sweet. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Have fun. Use Adobe Capture. That app is great. Use Onshape. It's fantastic. Here's the sketch I did at first to just figure out where everything was going to go. Yeah, hack on.